Are you looking for a rare legendary aspect like this, but no matter how long and hard you look, you just cannot seem to find it? A lot of our builds require certain aspects to make them very powerful, and certain builds require very rare aspects that very rarely drop. And even though you've played for hundreds of hours, you just still can't find them. Well, today I'm going to show you the best way to find those aspects, to somewhat almost guarantee over time that you get them, and how to target farm them so you can actually acquire them and make your build as powerful as it actually can be. So obviously there are a lot of rare aspects in the game. I'll just use these boots as an example. For my barbarian, this particular aspect makes it so Whirlwind periodically pulls enemies to you. Now, this is an aspect that is not actually in the Codex of Power, and this makes it a rare aspect to find because essentially you can only get it via a rare drop. Now, although there's not one particular method to make sure that you get an aspect for an item, there's a ton of ways to target farm them so you can save a lot of time, and over time make sure that you get these drops 100%. So before we get into finding these rare aspects that you're finding it hard to actually acquire, first I want to actually go over target farming and kind of how it works. So ideally with target farming, you have certain aspects that drop on certain pieces of gear. So for instance, if you're looking for like this aspect that I'm throwing up on the screen right now, you can see as an allowed item type, it only has ring on this list, meaning it can only be applied to a ring, and it's only going to drop on a ring because that's all it can be on. So as a quick example, the idea here is you want to farm rings as best you can so you can acquire this aspect, because there's obviously no point in trying to get other pieces of gear for this aspect because it won't be on it. Now there are a list of about 30 or so aspects specifically that drop on rings, so it is going to take a little while to get this, but this is the best way to kind of guarantee that you get it over time. So one thing that a lot of people already do is use their obols with the curiosity vendor to actually target farm for pieces. For instance, if you're looking for that ring I described, you're going to be able to go to one of these curiosity vendors and actually buy these rings with obols so you can get targeted drops and targeted aspects this way. One mistake I see a lot of people make here is that they go in here and just pick up these rings for 60 obols, but this is actually kind of a little bit of a waste, because if you notice, sacred gear, specifically in ancestral gear, is marked with the little gold or white icons that go above the actual piece of gear, like you can see here. And in this particular vendor, the ring does not have that. So if you look at the required level for the sacred piece of gear, it requires level 68, meaning it's going to drop much higher and much more rare and quality pieces, versus this ring that's level 42, meaning the rolls on the stats, the item level, everything else is going to be significantly reduced if you choose to buy this ring. So ideally you need to wait for this to refresh or go to another vendor at some point in time. And once another vendor, or this one, has that sacred symbol above the ring, that means it's going to be much higher level and be able to give you a much better targeted drop to finding that aspect that you've been missing for a long time. Now that's just the basic idea of target farming, specifically using obols, but there are a lot of other great ways to actually get specific gear and aspects, and some that are a lot better methods than others. The other best way to get gear is to target specific pieces of gear via hell tides. So hell tide events allow you to essentially target specific pieces of gear. Now I previously made a video and it discussed the best way to get rewards in hell tides, but if you're looking for very specific pieces, you can actually come in here, and as you get the in-game currency for hell tides, you can go to specific chests like these to get specific pieces of jewelry or specific pieces of armor or weaponry that you're kind of looking for, so you can target farm this way as well. Hell tides also give you a decent amount of XP, so if you want to run these, definitely make sure you use your currency to target farm if you need to. So the next best method for actually finding these rare aspects, or these aspects that you're missing and having trouble finding, are going to be through regular dungeons and nightmare dungeons. Now the difference here is regular dungeons, when running with multiple people, allow you to clear the dungeon much faster, and essentially you can get a lot of loot this way. And since you're actually getting a lot more loot, technically you're going to get a lot more legendary pieces this way and allow you to get a lot more aspects or range of aspects. Now over time, the actual rarity of the items and the power of the items shifts quite a bit when you start talking about nightmare dungeons. So nightmare dungeons, in comparison, if you run with a group of people, means you can clear them a lot quicker. And over time, if you compare both methods of running regular dungeons and nightmare dungeons being the same, being you're running both solo or you're running both in a group, nightmare dungeons are going to be the best option in my opinion, and this is for a couple reasons. So nightmare dungeons have confirmed to have higher loot tables as well as better rarity items, and essentially much more powerful items that drop, and essentially items that drop higher rolls as well for their affixes and stats. meaning you're going to get much better items this way, and you're much more likely to get a unique or legendary item overall per enemy versus in a regular dungeon, because the loot tables in Nightmare Dungeons are higher. That also goes for uniques, and you can see a couple unique items that I have here. Essentially, each one of these unique items I've gotten in a Nightmare Dungeon, which is why doing Nightmare Dungeons is so good already. Even though we have buffs upcoming, Nightmare Dungeons seem to be the ideal way to get your unique items. And most classes have certain unique items for that class that are best in slot, with aspects or effects on them that are unique effects that are going to be best for your build. Hence why Nightmare Dungeons give you the best opportunity to grab not only unique items, but the legendary aspects that you're missing as well. And you kind of get a 2-for-1 in terms of things that you're actually looking for. As well, obviously doing Nightmare Dungeons, you level up your glyphs, which are your extreme power generators later on in the game. And your glyphs make you extra powerful on top of all of the stuff that you're already using and all the skills and all of the armor that you're actually wearing. So that is an added bonus. On top of that, Nightmare Dungeons give pretty solid XP at the time being, especially if you can go through them quick enough. So Nightmare Dungeons right now seem to be the best ideal way to get all your unique items and your legendary aspects. And the thing is, you can't specifically guarantee any drop. So overall, sometimes you're just going to be unlucky. But the thing is, if you do Nightmare Dungeons and farm your obols as you're doing these and making sure you spend them the right way at vendors, you can almost guarantee and increase your actual odds of finding the aspects that you're missing. Now, World events and Legion events seem to also have higher loot tables, meaning when you run them, you can typically get much better loot than when you're just normally running a regular dungeon. However, due to the infrequency of them showing up, and the many that I've tested over my time playing, the actual quantity of items and rarity of items in terms of level that you get from farming Nightmare Dungeons far surpasses both of those. So ideally run Nightmare Dungeons or regular dungeons if you can, especially in a group. This is going to give you much better chances of finding legendary aspects that you need and unique items. And remember, Nightmare Dungeons do give higher rarity and more powerful drops. So if you're specifically looking for uniques or items with high rolls, start farming your Nightmare Dungeons. Now, Nightmare Dungeons in about 3 weeks before Season 1 are getting a buff to not only XP, but the actual rarity of items themselves and the amount of items that should be dropping. And also, they'll make it so that way you will be able to teleport directly to a Nightmare Dungeon instead of have to run straight to it. And you can port from dungeon to dungeon, reducing the downtime from having to run from dungeon to dungeon when starting a new one. So run Nightmare Dungeons and regular dungeons in a group if possible to increase your loot pool, and make sure when you acquire obols that you spend them at the Curiosity Vendor, but you specifically do not waste them on items that aren't sacred or ancestral, because up until level 60 I didn't even realize that there was a difference in those items. And by making sure you buy the higher level ones, you're kind of guaranteeing higher rolls and better pieces this way. That being said, those are the best ways to target farm and find aspects that you're missing. In general, it's just going to take some time because you can't specifically guarantee any pieces in any particular way. But these are the best ways to increase your chances of getting specific pieces of gear and specific aspects that you need. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like the video below and check out this video on the left or the right for more awesome Diablo 4 content. Thanks.